Okay. All right. Thomas Ricola. Roy Gathercall. Rebecca Piros.
Here. Present.
Andrea Byerly.
Present.
Did I say that right? Okay. Krista Miller. Erica Alvarez.
Present.
Samuel Roeder.
Here.
Karen Arneson. Timothy Towers. Okay, so that is it for the committee members that are here. That was the roll call. And so with that, maybe we should do introductions first, Heather, and then they can choose a chair and a vice chair. Maybe that makes more sense.
Okay.
Because otherwise, we're not really going to know. They're not going to know each other to know who might want to do that or not, as the case may be. So I'll go ahead and introduce myself first off. I'm Karen Hoffman. I'm the city engineer here, and I am the project manager for the ADA transition plan. Shannon, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself since you're the other staff here?
Yeah, I'd love to. Shannon Buckmaster, Economic Health Manager, which is just a big fancy title for economic development and business support. But I am also the ADA complaints person. So making sure that we are listening to our community and making those adjustments as needed as soon as we can. Thank you.
Okay, Heather, if you want to do your crew and then we'll get to the members themselves.
I'm Heather Butzek. I am the consultant with MIG hired by the city to assist with the ADA self-evaluation and transition plan. A little bit about myself. I identify as female. I wear glasses, a gray sweater today, and over the ear headphones. And I do identify, I think I already mentioned as she, her. And so I will now introduce Hayden.
Hi, I'm Hayden Agnew-Whelan. I've worked for several years with Heather on accessibility planning. I primarily focus on facility evaluations, which I'll be leading for this project, but also have experience with program policy review, be assisting that as well. And I will pass it over to my colleague, Alexa.
Hi, everyone. I'm Alexa, and I'm a landscape designer and access specialist at MIG. And I'm fairly new. I've been here for just about a year now, but I've been helping Heather out with several ADA transition plans. I'm project manager for Newberg. A little bit about me. I have really long brown hair and blue eyes, and I'm wearing little hoop earrings and a shirt with little skillings on it. And I identify as female as well. And I'm also deaf, so I'm really excited to be involved with the stakeholder meeting today. I should pop to a stakeholder. Rebecca is at my left, so Rebecca, if you want to introduce yourself.
Okay, I'm Rebecca Pyros. I'm visually impaired since 6 years ago, and I've been a resident of Newberg since 2002. But I lived here in 1980, 79 to 82. I was a planning commissioner back then, where we did the first urban growth boundary progress or project. And I'm currently on the Newberg School Board and looking forward to assisting this committee. So I'll pass it on to, I can't see who to pass it on to.
Okay. I can go next. So I'm Timothy Towers. I'm a resident of Tualatin, Oregon, married, 4 kids. I'm the facility service director for Friendsview Retirement Community over behind George Fox. We're, if you don't know who we are, we're a very large retirement community with lots of needs, and we have lots of ADA issues and concerns here a lot, we deal with seniors. So I thought this would be a great committee to dive into on my first run with Newberg committees. So here I am. And I don't know who needs to go. I think Samuel needs to go.
Sure, I'll take it next. I'm Samuel Roeder. I live here in Newberg. I actually live in a seniors park, Mountain View Mobile Estates. I was the park manager here for a few years. I'm also a disabled veteran through the Navy. I'm also a special education teacher out of Sherwood, and I identify as he, him, male. And then I guess Erica is directly below me, so.
Hi, I'm Erica. I have lived here in Newberg since 2012. My husband and I moved in from the Beaverton area. I've never been part of a community organization or committee or anything, so this will be a first for me, but I feel like this is a good one. My daughter was born almost 5 years ago next month with optic nerve hypoplasia. She'll be in the background. So she is visually impaired, uses a cane, and we're working on getting into kindergarten next year. So I'm excited to see how we can make her community that she's going to grow up in more accessible for her and others like her.
My name is Andrea Byerly, she, her pronouns, and I've lived in Newberg, Dundee area since 2005. I am currently the Assistant Director of Disability and Accessibility Services at George Fox. So I don't identify as having a disability, but I work with a large population of students with disabilities at George Fox. So I'm pleased to be able to be involved with this committee to help, I guess, speak on behalf of the students that I serve.
Great, thank you all. And again, thank you for taking your time to participate. We couldn't do it without you. So do you want to say that? And then as I noted, you do as a committee, the 5 of you and the other 4 that aren't here today, but you do have to select a chair and a vice chair. You can do that multiple ways. You can make a nomination. Someone can step up and say they would want to do it and everybody would agree. But does anybody want to be the chair of this committee?
Do you mind explaining what would be entailed with each position?
Sure. So the chair is the one that will, with the agenda, will run the meeting, making sure that we're staying on time and, check for, we would coordinate with them to make sure that the agenda is working and those types of things. There's only going to be a couple of meetings, so it's not a big load for this group. And then the vice chair would cover if the chair was gone, basically, is the way that works. So basically the chair is just going to make sure that the meeting is running, follow the agenda, calling on people, those types of things, and calling for votes when those are necessary.
I would like to nominate Samuel, if he's willing.
I would be willing to do it, yes.
Are there any others that would want to do that? All right, so then by show of hands, who's willing to have Samuel be chair? That is unanimous. Okay, and then Samuel, I can do the vice chair piece or you can take it over for that, either way.
Yeah, so do we have anybody volunteering for the, sorry, what was the chair position? It's assistant, correct?
Vice chair.
Vice chair, thank you.
I will volunteer for that. That's Rebecca Pyros.
Rebecca has volunteered. Is there any others? Seeing no others, raise of hand for agreement. seems everyone's in agreement. So Rebecca Pyros will be.
All right, so so Samuel, I'll just kind of, so now we'll pass it back to Heather, and she's going to run most of where we're at, and then and work through the rest of the agenda.
All right. Thank you, Karen. And thank you, everybody, for being here today. It was great to get everybody's introductions. I'm going to share my screen now. Oh, it says that the host has disabled screen sharing. Ah, there we go. Okay, I just want to verify, and you can just nod with your head that you can see my screen. All right. Before we start the meeting, I just want to go over the participant agreement that was provided within the meeting packet for today's meeting. First to start, please mute your mic when you're not speaking. The meeting moderator will do this for you during the meeting if the mute is accidentally turned off. On the screen are the items included in the meeting materials under the participant agreement with a companion graphic of 5 hands in the color of a rainbow fanning out and connecting into one another to form a pentagon-like circle. So during the discussion, we would like only one person to speak at a time, and we can ensure that we're not overlapping each other in conversation by using the raise hand function in the reactions pane in Zoom, located on the bottom of your Zoom meeting window. When the last speaker is done, the moderator will let you know that your raised hand is acknowledged, and it will be your turn to speak. Additionally, please be respectful of one another's opinions and use your video so we can connect. Share opinions and acknowledge others, and use I statements when expressing feelings and opinions, but we'd like everyone to speak from the heart. Please use the chat feature to share comments in your own words, but note that your chat will be shared with the moderator, who will read the chat aloud at a good time during the discussion. We also ask that you be present and avoid checking email or your phone during the meeting. And lastly, we'd like everyone to be patient. We'll try to answer all your questions during the meeting, but may need to follow up with more detailed responses afterwards. So on the screen is a title slide stating the Americans with Disabilities Act Self-Evaluation and Transition Plan with the City of Newberg logo with the month and year noted. The image is on the background is of wheels of a manual wheelchair with the hand on the controls as it moves along a brick paver path in a natural setting. This slide outlines today's agenda and provides images of blue and white pictograms of disabilities. The first on the left side of the screen is of a person using a white cane. The next is the international symbol of accessibility. The next is hands representing sign language, followed by a pictogram for teletypewriters, and lastly, the pictogram for assisting listening equipment. For today's agenda, we'll be discussing the requirements of the ADA Self-Evaluation and Transition Plan. We'll provide an overview of the project. We will have a discussion on the needs, challenges, and opportunities within the city as it relates to accessibility topics, and we will discuss the planning priorities and next steps. I think I skipped a slide, yes. I'd like to state first that the information, materials, and technical assistance presented today are intended solely as informational guidance and are neither determination of your legal rights or responsibilities under the ADA, nor binding on the agency with enforcement responsibility under the ADA. On the screen is the same cover slide with the heading Title II of the ADA. So at this point, I'm going to provide an overview of the Americans with the Disabilities Act and the city's obligation. So the Americans with Disabilities Act was enacted in the early 90s, and it is a civil rights law. It prohibits discrimination based on disability. Now, the photo on the screen is of President Bush signing the legislation into law. The president's emphatic directive that day was let the shameful walls of exclusion finally come tumbling down, which encapsulates a simple yet long overdue message of the ADA, that millions of Americans with disabilities are full-fledged citizens and as such are entitled to legal protections that ensure their equal opportunity and access to the mainstream of American life. Now, this law provides all people with disabilities the right to participate in all aspects of life, be it taking a recreation class, voting, serving on jury duty, and even crossing the street. Accessibility is not just physical access, such as adding a ramp where steps exist. Accessibility is much more, and it requires looking how programs, services, and activities are delivered. But before the ADA, there was Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. The image on the screen is a historic photo of disability rights protesters calling to attention the need for these protections. Rather than any disability law that came before it, Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act made it illegal for the federal government, federal contractors, and any entity receiving federal financial assistance to discriminate on the basis of disability. We can't do any of this work for the disabled community without directly including the disabled community. The disabled community has a saying, nothing about us without us, and it's crucial to take this seriously because the disabled community's lived experiences and access needs are the most important considerations when working towards creating more accessible and inclusive public spaces and policies. On the screen is a black and white photo of autism advocates holding signs stating nothing about us without us. I am not a puzzle, and I am a person. And autism does not speak for me. People with disabilities want to be involved and have the right to be involved in any project that engages with the public for comment, feedback, buy-in, and approval. Your interest and involvement in the ad hoc committee will ensure that the city engages with disabilities community and continues to engage and acknowledge people with disabilities moving forward. So the titles of the ADA. The image on this screen is of a service animal walking with a person along a roadway bridge. Now, the ADA is comprised of 5 titles, which cover all aspects of life in the United States. The different titles provide guidance to different facets of life and those providing services within those realms. Title I protects every employee from discrimination, and it requires that employers make reasonable modifications to work environments and tasks. Title II is the title that addresses public services, and this is the focus of our work with the city and our discussion today. Title III of the ADA covers private and nonprofit organizations, including restaurants, offices, and commercial establishments. Title IV addresses telecommunication services for individuals with hearing and speech disabilities. And Title V of the Americans with Disabilities Act sets forth the miscellaneous provisions, such as requiring the Access Board to issue accessibility standards. Now, while the ADA has 5 separate titles, Title II is the section specifically applicable to public entities and the programs, services, and activities that they deliver. Title II for state and local governments. Title II of the ADA prohibits state and local governments from discriminating on the basis of disability in services, programs, or activities of all state and local government entities. Now, this obligation covers all programs, all services, and all activities provided directly or indirectly through contracts. This slide has an image of a child using a wheelchair on play equipment with her service animal next to her. Equality and access. A public entity's services, programs, or activities, when viewed in their entirety, must be readily accessible to and usable by individuals with disabilities. This standard is known as program accessibility, and it applies to all existing facilities of a public entity. Now, public entities, however, are not necessarily required to make each of their existing facilities accessible. The images on the slide are from the Public Works Day event intended to engage and inform the public on all the activities Public Works is involved with, and includes a picture of a child meeting a police canine, an image of a staffed outdoor information board, and the third image is of children in a sandbox digging for utilities at a Newberg event. So Title II general non-discrimination provisions. No qualified individual with a disability shall, on the basis of disability, be excluded from participation in or be denied the benefits of the services, programs, or activities of a public entity, or be subjected to discrimination by any public entity. This slide summarizes the general prohibitions against discrimination. The city needs to anticipate the needs of people with disabilities, ensure the maximum integration of individuals with disabilities, The city cannot refuse to provide service or require participation in a separate program. There can be no unnecessary eligibility standards or special requirements or extra charges, and the city must provide reasonable accommodations and make reasonable modifications to programs and provide equally effective communication. The next two slides cover the technical requirements of the ADA. So the first is the city must provide notice and make publicly available the protections against discrimination and its applicability to the services, programs, or activities of the city. When a city has 50 or more employees, it must designate staff responsible for the implementation of the self-evaluation and transition plan. Make available the name, office, and address and telephone number of the designated employee or employees, and develop and publish a grievance procedure and investigate any complaint. For the self-evaluation, the city needs to evaluate services, policies, and practices and identify modifications needed to these services, policies, and practices. And for the transition plan, list any architectural barriers, identify feasible solutions to each of the barriers, establish a timeline for removing the barriers, and identify the person responsible for Title II compliance. Now, for both the self-evaluation process and the transition plan preparation, public entities are required to involve people with disabilities. And the final slide on Title II administrative requirements includes an image of the cover of the Americans with Disabilities Act Title II regulations. The scope of work we will discuss next will assist the city in achieving its obligations under Title II of the ADA. The city has already provided notice of non-discrimination, developed an ADA grievance procedure, designated a person who is responsible for overseeing Title II compliance, is completing a self-evaluation of services, policies, and practices, in the process of developing a transition plan that identifies structural modifications needed for compliance, and is including people with disabilities in the planning process. And at this point, I'm going to stop my share. And I just want to ask if there are any general questions or hands raised at this time. I see Rebecca's raised her hand. Go ahead, Rebecca.
Am I muted?
No, I can hear you.
Okay. I was wondering, I know that there was tours being done of the facilities. Was anyone with disabilities included on the tours of the on-site visits?
Tours. Can you say specifically what you're referring to? Are you talking about like a program tour, or are you talking about site assessments?
Site assessment.
Oh, okay. So the city, we will be talking about the scope of work at the next agenda item, but the city did do some preliminary assessment work prior to our involvement, and our role is completing assessments for the remaining facilities. What this entails is taking a tape measure level and measuring the as-built conditions of each of these facilities and comparing them to the minimum standards that are within the design guidelines of the ADA and the Oregon Code. Does that answer your question?
Well, I was just wondering if at any point has the city invited or had people who are in a wheelchair or who are visually blind to help with the assessment so that they get a firsthand impression of what our needs are.
I'll let Karen answer that. I don't know the history within Newberg of the assessment processes.
I'm not sure I was involved either, but my guess is no, we did not include anybody with disabilities in that initial assessment.
Is there any plans to do that with people with disabilities, to be invited to tour the facilities that we're assessing?
So as far as conducting the assessments, our scope of work does not include a tour of the facilities with individuals with disabilities. We pretty much just go out as if like a plumber or electrician would and just take measures of the site.
All right, thank you.
Mhm. Any other questions? Okay, I am going to share my screen again. Okay, you should all see the agenda on the screen. I would just like to address that we have now done the presentation of what the ADA is and why it's required. And the next part of the meeting, I'd like to go over the project overview, the goals, process, and schedule, and the role of the ad hoc committee. This will be followed by a discussion of needs, challenges, and opportunities, followed by a discussion of planning priorities. Hopefully you all received this packet prior to the meeting. Did anyone not receive this information? Okay, I do want to point out that the participant agreement, a brief overview of the Americans with Disabilities Act, and an outline of the presentation is included in the packet. And so now I'm just going to go through the project work plan. This project is broken into 5 key phases. The first phase is primarily the administrative phase of getting the project started, initiative and managing the schedule and timeline moving forward, and developing the ad hoc committee and initiating that process. This section of the scope of work also discusses the assumptions and limitations in the work that we will be able to perform as part of this contract. So if I go to task 2, this addresses the self-evaluation of cities' activities, programs, and services, and we have begun this process. The first task is reviewing the City of Newberg's programs, policies, and standards. Our engineer has been reviewing the city's current standards and specifications for design of facilities within the right-of-way. We have been completing a review of publicly available information that is online and reviewing policies and participation forms, permits, and all the different programs that the city might have for potentially discriminatory practices. And we are documenting any of our findings. We also, at the same time, are administering a questionnaire to staff. And in this questionnaire, we address the legislation of the ADA in its entirety regarding programs, activities, and services, and anything that is applicable to the programs provided by the city. And that questionnaire is currently live, and staff have been participating and taking this. We'll be completing an analysis of the information and providing a summary of the results in tandem with our findings from the review of the city's policies, procedures, and website. This will be put into a report, the draft self-evaluation report. This report will be reviewed by city staff for comment and feedback. We will make revisions and edits, and then we will share that information out with this group and the public after one set of review and revision. This report will become the roadmap for the city to remove potentially discriminatory policies, practices, and activities in its current practices. And it'll be downloaded as well into a spreadsheet that the ADA coordinator can use to track performance over time. Are there any questions regarding the self-evaluation phase of the scope of work before I move to the facility evaluation? I think I see a hand raised. Is that Samuel?
Yes.
Yeah.
Is there material providing what that questionnaire, those questions are? Because I feel that might be a little helpful to us knowing where that result is coming from too.
That will be included in the report. So that's included as part of the self-evaluation report, all the topics and items that were discussed.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? Okay. So phase 3, the facility evaluations, and I'm just going to scroll through the scope of work on my screen. Phase 1 is review the preparation of barrier assessment report information. As I had noted previously, the city had gone through the assessment of some of its key facilities. The library and city hall were included in that list. What we're doing is we are coming out and visiting the sites that were not included in those initial assessments. And then we're compiling that information into a format that can be turned into a transition plan where the barriers have been identified, and the city can then work with this group to prioritize and schedule the mitigation of those barriers. So what we'll be doing is providing a summary of all the information that's been collected to date for this group to review and assist the city in applying priorities to develop a transition plan schedule. So after we complete the summary report, we'll have a meeting with staff to discuss all of the findings and rank and prioritize internally what we know is going to be happening with each site. So say the city knows at the library there's going to be a renovation in a particular area of the building in 2 years, we'll know that that can be scheduled 2 years down the line. And other sites where there may not be large capital projects scheduled, we can discuss, well, what is the timeline that can be addressed? And then we will bring that information to this group as well. In tandem with the buildings, we will also be reviewing, and we've started the review of the city's inventory of barriers within the right-of-way. So facilities in the right-of-way include the sidewalks and curb ramps and crosswalks. And we're using a combination of different sets of data that's been collected over the last few years. And we're finding the baseline of information so we can move forward and identify the gaps of what additional information needs to be collected in order to inventory the barriers that exist within the right-of-way and developing a schedule to plan for the removal of those barriers in the right-of-way. And this, again, will involve a strategy session with staff to vet the information. And we're in the process right now of reviewing that information and discussing where ongoing projects are currently in place, projects that have been completed since initial work has been done, and projects that are scheduled out into the future. And at the end of the meeting today, we'll be talking about additional planning priorities to apply to all of the barrier information that we've collected and summarized to date. We will also have a summary report to provide to this group as well. So after we've done all of the preliminary analysis, we're going to re-meet with this group, and you'll be able to review before the meeting the self-evaluation report and the summary of all the barriers identified at the building facilities as well as the right-of-way facilities. Parks are not included in this assessment. They are managed by a separate recreation district, and we're not included in this scope of work. Once we meet with you and we discuss the priorities and any modifications you want to see or things that may have been overlooked or not addressed, and we can incorporate those edits and comments into the report, we will develop a draft ADA self-evaluation and transition plan. I'm sorry, I hit my mouse screen a little too fast. And that will include the results of the findings for both the evaluation of programs, activities, and services, the results of the identified barriers in the built environment. This will also include a summary of any public outreach. It will include a transition plan, implementation schedule, and strategies for implementing the plan over time, because things are dynamic, opportunities change within the city, year after year, and these plans tend to be anywhere from 10 to 20 years in length. And we will also include in this the ADA notice, grievance, and information on the ADA coordinator and contact information. Once we've developed the draft, it will be available for public review and distribution and for public comment. Once we receive all the public comment, we will then provide a final draft to the city for acceptance or adoption. And we will also provide the city with implementation data for tracking barrier mitigation moving forward. So this will be a mix of geospatial data that can be integrated into an asset management system, as well as Excel documentation and tracking for identified barriers in policy activities and programs. The inventory of facilities that we're going to evaluate that are in addition to the library and city hall is the wastewater treatment plant, the Butler property, Francis Square, the Girl Scout garden, and the Waterwise demonstration garden, as well as on-street parking in addition to other facilities in the right-of-way. So that is my quick summary of the 5 phases of the ADA self-evaluation and transition plan. There's a lot of activities there that happen, but I just want to take a moment and see if there are any additional questions. And you have all the information there if you didn't have time to review this before the meeting. And so feel free to reach out to Karin after today if your question is not addressed in today's meeting. And do we have any hands, Hayden? I don't think so.
I don't see any.
All right. So now we're going to go to issues, needs, and challenges. And let me open up my, are you all seeing the needs, challenges, and opportunities on my screen? Yes. Okay. So one of the things I like to start off with is, what is the city doing well? What is working well as far as accessibility and accessing programs, services, and activities within the city of Newberg? Does anyone have a positive comment or experience with the city that they would like to share? Okay. Well, how about what is, oh, is that Erica's hand, or were you just typing Erica?
I can't figure out the unmute button, sorry. I was gonna say that I have noticed, at least in my neighborhood, I have noticed a couple changes in the sidewalks. My daughter and I go for walks and we're learning how to use her cane. And I have noticed a couple of the sidewalk transitions from street to sidewalk with the yellow bumps starting to come in. So I do really appreciate that as we're learning mobility skills. So I am seeing some small changes like that. I'm still learning what's needed as well, because myself, I don't have a disability, but I'm working on advocating for someone who does. So that's one small thing I'm seeing that's starting to change.
Anyone else? Okay, how about biggest needs? This is your opportunity to let the city know where you think there could be more work done. I see Andrea has her hand up.
Yeah, so I mean, one thing is I as well have noticed the increase in sidewalk ramps in the area around sort of George Fox and downtown in particular. But one of the problems that is still there is the streets in between are still very, there's a lot of potholes, they're very rough. And so for people with walkers and wheelchairs, it can be difficult to navigate across the streets, even though there's ramps.
So the crosswalks themselves have barriers?
Yeah, the streets themselves.
Okay. Does anyone else, since we're on the topic of the right-of-way, any other observations or experiences? Rebecca?
Well, there's certain sections like on Elliott Street where the sidewalk is non-existent, or if you go down to Meridian to, you go down Fulton to Meridian, from Meridian, Fulton to George Fox, there's no sidewalks. So you have to think, like to get to downtown, I have to go to Fulton to George Fox, through George Fox, and then down a certain way to navigate that. And it would be nice to have all this, the sidewalks that are there completed, so that it's that you can travel the city.
Thanks for that observation. One of the things that the Americans with Disabilities Act does not address are gaps in the pedestrian network. The ADA legislation addresses only the things that are built. So my question is to Karen, and whether or not the city is currently working on a pedestrian connectivity or plan to address gaps in the pedestrian network.
Yes and no. We are working on it. Obviously, there's costs associated with that. Elliott Road in particular is in design, and we're hoping to be under construction this summer to provide that connectivity from the high school out to 99W. And then we are working on, actually it's out to bid right now, a project to fix all of the ADA ramps along Meridian between Fulton and 99W. And then if we have enough money available, there's like a 300-foot gap on one side of the street, and we are hoping to fill in that gap. Unfortunately, I don't have approval yet from the property owners to do that. So we are slowly trying to make those things happen. Unfortunately, they happen slower than what we would like. We have completed projects around 2 of the parks that are actually city-owned, although they're managed by CPRD. Memorial Park and Scott Levitt Park are both owned by the city, and we actually in the last 2 years have put sidewalks all the way around those parks and included ramps, which they did not have before. So we're slowly but surely getting there, but we do have a lot more to go.
Thank you.
And I thought I saw another hand raised. Timothy.
Yeah, I'll tag on to the sidewalks a little bit around, like, because we're over here in Fulton and Meridian and Villa. But what would be nice to see happen is more of the crosswalks with the flashing solar powered lights. So we put one on Fulton at the crosswalk that leads our facility to George Fox. Because we had a resident hit here about 8 years ago, and Friendsview paid for the one in the street in front of our facility. But we really need those in several locations around, not just on Fulton near Friendsview, but over on Providence and Hayes Street. There's a couple roundabouts, and we have a neighborhood over there, but I've seen residents almost struck by cars on those crosswalks too. And without those flashing lights, drivers don't see people in the streets. So it'd be really nice to have the crosswalks, the ramps updated, but the flashing lights installed, in several places. I only know of 2 in town here, and they're right around our facility, but we really need more of those around here in Newberg.
Are those the flashing hybrid beacons, Karen, that Timothy is referring to? Okay.
Right, yeah, the ones that you push the button and they have an obnoxious flash. Those really help, and seniors don't walk quickly across the street. And that really draws the attention of cars to stop.
So at the locations that Timothy's referring to, Karen, those are under the city's jurisdiction for crossing?
Right, are you asking me that? Or
I'm asking Karen.
Oh.
For context, because I know ODOT has some roadways in your community as well.
So Providence is under the city's jurisdiction. I guess we would have to look at where else we were thinking about. We have installed some on Villa Road, also along with the one on Fulton. So it would just kind of, if, you know, that's one of the things that comes out of this, we would have to look at, you know, where the locations are and do we set criteria for when those are installed or not, as the case may be. So, because we can't put them at every crosswalk. So.
Right. So we can include information in the plan that addresses when there is an installation of a flashing beacon, what the minimum accessibility requirements are to ensure that they're included as far as the push buttons and crossing time. We currently don't have any crossings or push button crossings to evaluate as part of our assessment. My understanding is that all the push buttons are under ODOT's jurisdiction, correct?
For all the signals themselves, yes.
Yeah, okay. The next hand I saw was Erica.
Oh, I just took it away. You just answered it. I had more questions about options for crosswalks and push buttons and visual accessibility, actually non-visual accessibility in the form of tactile or audio, but if they're all ODOT, then that doesn't apply for now.
And I do know that ODOT has their own transition plan and all of the information is available online. And you can directly contact their ADA coordinators and engineering group to request information on their crossings.
Okay, I can look into that.
And Andrea was next.
Yeah, this is kind of along the same line, but I'm not sure if it's under ODOT's jurisdiction or not. So in terms of pedestrian crossing across, oh gosh, I can't remember the names of the street, but like 99W on like in the main downtown area on the one-way streets, like in particular, the crossing at College and 99, like by chapters, it's incredibly unsafe for even people without disabilities. But so I don't know what I'm asking exactly, but maybe a different traffic pattern or a new, like I saw there was a new arrow light down at Main Street and 99. Like, are there ways to change that intersection so that people stop almost getting hit in the crosswalk? So we have students that so you know, people not only with you know, wheelchairs, walkers, mobility aids, but also autism or developmental disabilities who might not be as aware of the traffic. Like if they have a walk light, but there's that left turn, you know, from College, there might not be as aware. Anyway, I don't really know what I'm asking for, except that it's incredibly unsafe.
Okay, so we're hearing that 99W and College is a dangerous crossing. And I'm going to go out on a limb here and probably go with the understanding that that's probably ODOT's jurisdiction, Karen. Yeah. So I'm of the belief that there's always a design solution to increase safety. And when you're dealing with the state, you have to advocate and contact. And also, you know, see if there are any projects planned at that intersection in the near future. And if not, make sure you let them know that there are concerns. The other hand that I saw was Rebecca's.
Speaking of flashing crosswalks, I know, I think Springbrook is a city, a maintained street, and the crossing between the busy development on the other side, Victoria Avenue, and the fire station. That would be one place also because a lot of school children cross there. And they have this home for apartments for people with disabilities right there too.
So you
So-
said that was Victoria Avenue near the fire station, and what was the other cross street?
Springbrook.
And Springbrook. Okay. We have that noted. Are there any other zones? I'm hearing the university and the couplet that's ODOT. Are there any other high-use pedestrian corridors that you think we should investigate for barriers as a higher priority?
This is Erica, and I don't know exactly what you would say is high pedestrian. I know it's a neighborhood. I live on the older side of town, so on the south side, over towards Edwards. And whenever I go to the other neighborhoods, I realize just how poor our sidewalks are in general on this side. And it's come into even more focus now that I'm walking with somebody with a cane. And so I don't know who maintains sidewalks. I know like right in front of someone's house, usually that's a homeowner or something like that, but the main sidewalks like are along Winooski, we walk up and down Winooski often to the free little library and things like that, and there are the sidewalks are in very poor condition, unsafe. A lot of times people in wheelchairs and motorized scooters are often pushed into the street because they can't make it on the sidewalks.
Okay, and I just want to make sure we captured the correct neighborhood. So sidewalk maintenance in general. And what is your neighborhood again? Can you repeat that for the notes, please?
Yeah, I live off Winooski. So we're at Winooski and like between 5th and 6th right now, but all the way up and down Winooski from the old mill to River Street is where we kind of go.
Oh, would you mind spelling Winooski? No, okay.
WYNOOSKI.
Excellent, thank you. Yeah. Are there any other trouble neighborhoods for pedestrian movement? While we wait for other opinions, I saw that Samuel had his hand up.
So one thing I have not noticed in my years of living in this town, we don't really have any mapping that clearly identifies what would be considered ADA pathways. I live in the seniors area of town, which is Springbrook and back behind Fred Meyer's. I have not seen anything that identifies that, and I've been asked that by my neighbors over and over. I think it's something that's definitely a need.
So the identification of accessible routes from home to key destinations in town?
Yes.
Okay. Timothy, you have your hand raised. Oh, I think we lost Timothy. Oh, there he is.
Yeah, I'm back. Okay. Sorry, I struggle sometimes with my computer and Zoom. So bike lanes, where do they fall into a program like this? So I'm a cyclist, and I ride around Newberg a lot, and I notice bike lanes appear and they disappear. But then seniors also use bike lanes with their scooters, and when the sidewalks are rutted, like the comments have come up, they'll go out into the bike lane, but the bike lanes will go for 50 feet and then they stop, or they're so full of trash that you can't really, a bike can ride through it, but a scooter, they can't. So do we look at bike lanes on these kind of a program around Newberg?
The ADA does not address bike lanes, but what the ADA does address, at least in this jurisdiction, are the sidewalks and pedestrian routes. Where the ADA comes into play is when bike routes can be in conflict with accessible parking.
Okay.
But the ADA in this plan will not address bike lanes. That's going to be more of an active transportation plan, as part of the transportation system plan.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
you.
Now, and I have not reviewed the standards and specifications myself yet. The preliminary review is almost complete. But if there are bike lane design details and the engineer finds that there are inherent conflicts between the two, that would be called out. But it's unusual to have something like that in the standards and specifications. Corin, are they in there? You would know. No. Okay. Okay. And Timothy, your hand is still up, or no, it's not. Okay. Right. I don't see any more hands raised. So, as far as needs and challenges, they're kind of in that same wheelhouse of content, but are there any challenges in particular that you've encountered in engaging with the city? It doesn't have to be the right of way. It can just be engaging in other activities that we should be looking at and addressing as part of this plan. Yes, Rebecca.
Well, I must admit I'm having trouble with the finding information on the city of Newberg to get to the staff email and I don't find it very accessible. I have to get my sighted husband to help me through the process. So if accessibility for people who are visually impaired, I don't know how to help, but it's difficult.
So as part of the self-evaluation, we are doing a preliminary review of the accessibility of the city's online tools and communications. And I know that Alexa has spearheaded that review.
Mhm.
So that'll be included in the report.
Mhm. Would it be helpful to meet with Alexa to show her the struggles I have? I mean, I would think part of this committee would be to help demonstrate the problems we're having with the tools that are available. I'm just asking, I just want to be helpful.
So Alexa, can you take a moment and summarize some of your observations at this point? Are you able to do that today? I know you didn't come prepared to do that, but I'm wondering if you have any insights as to your observations.
Yes, in general, I mean, we do make general comments about website accessibility and just making sure that, the format of the web pages are clear, there's color contrast, that certain forms are fillable and also readable by screen readers. So, we've made general notes across the board about these topics. I've also taken a look at sort of like anything that pops up in terms of information of like access, requesting accommodation, even like items such as like parking that pop up sometimes, or like ticketing and tours and things like that. So I'm happy to sort of like maybe send a few more notes via email if that works a little better for you. Just we can kind of run through like what we've started to review. I do have to dive a little bit deeper on that. But I do value your insight. Like, of course, if you have any comments or specific things on the website that have, come up as completely inaccessible to you for any reason, or if you think something is missing, we can definitely take note of that and
All right.
continue to, make sure that that goes into the report and into the
All right.
questionnaire.
Thank you.
Yeah, and if there's anything in particular that you want to share today, please feel free and we'll get it documented in the notes.
We definitely want to make sure that we include whatever you feel has not been up to speed for you as far as access, because I mean, I know what you mean when certain web pages pop up and maybe they aren't captioned, or maybe there's no alternative text, or So yeah, if anything in particular does come to mind or that you've experienced, we're happy to take note of that. So let us know.
Well, just the situation with logging into the email, you have to go to the City of Newberg email website, which I can't find. My husband has to find it, and then go down to the staff email and log in, and then to the agenda today had pop-ups that I couldn't operate. And so I haven't had a chance to, I reviewed the ones that was sent for the previous meeting, but today I wasn't able to get into the agenda. So the pop-ups are very hard to deal with.
Well, luckily for today, the agenda and content were exactly the same as the last meeting. So
Yeah,
you only need to
yeah.
review one set of information, thankfully.
Yeah.
I have a question about that, though. It seems like maybe a question for Karen and Shannon. I'm wondering is there a third party contractor that sort of like comes up when folks need to log into these meetings or review materials? Is there an issue with the contractor or software being used?
There shouldn't be. We normally have, it's on the agenda. We have an agendas link on our webpage, and that's where there's a whole list of all of the meetings, and you should be able to click on the view details and it come up. If it's not, then we have a separate problem. But one place to look. But I do understand what Rebecca's saying is I struggle sometimes to find the staff login or the staff email login on the webpage. And what I'll say is just in general, and Shannon can correct me, but just finding anything in general on the website is a challenge at times. The search function helps sometimes, but not always. And we are aware of that.
Okay.
We don't have it fixed yet, but we are aware that it's an issue.
So case in point, while this conversation is going on, I'm trying to quickly find a link to the webpage to post it in the chat, and I'm struggling. I'm on my third page with the city website. I can say, however, it was brought up in a recent administrators meeting at the city of Newberg that for 2023 fiscal budget that we need to build in the cost of updating our software. So it's not going to happen for this upcoming budget cycle, but we're aware that our website is challenging on the best of days in ideal circumstances. I'm sorry.
Thank you both.
Thanks. And the ADA.gov or the DOJ site just came out with updated guidelines regarding web accessibility. So if you did not receive that notification, Shannon, I can forward that to you. Okay. Any other hands? I don't see any. So, we can move away from challenges. Please, if anything else comes up, do not hesitate. But are there any places for opportunity and growth, like programs that are existing or little things that the city's doing where there's an opportunity to expand and enhance? It's kind of in tandem with the, how's the city getting things right? But any collaborations with organizations or other entities within Newberg that could be highlighted or brought in to this process? Andrea.
I don't know if this quite fits in there, but I've done some talking with the Newberg Downtown Coalition, and that feels like an opportunity if this, I don't know how much this city collaborates with that organization, but I know that they're trying to do some things to encourage accessibility within private businesses, which I know is outside the scope of this, but just in terms of increasing accessibility, if folks are able to get around the streets and the sidewalks, but then are not able to access the businesses, then there's lost opportunity there. So collaboration with the Newberg Downtown Coalition.
Great. Any other thoughts on opportunities? I see Samuel has his hand up.
So something that I've actually enjoyed about Newberg is our arts walks and things of that nature. I think we could probably be having City Hall have it available for people to discuss their walk. I know that myself, I've had multiple times where I've noticed a couple things just from walking around the community, and the presence of the city being out there might also be able to take in some information of that. I think that's a good opportunity because they're usually involved anyway.
So that was the Art Walk program?
There's the art walks, and I think it's the first, I believe it's called the First Friday. I'm not sure. I'm trying to remember what they're called. We're not doing them yet, I think.
Okay. To come back online soon. All right. I saw another hand. Erica.
I've really enjoyed. I've worked with the library quite a bit in the past. Probably like I think we started about 3 years ago, setting up a section for Braille and large print and things accessibility. So they've done a really good job of getting that started. I know they've got a lot of work to do still for the building itself accessibility, but also for getting that section going. But I've really appreciated their willingness to help and their communication with me.
Great, thank you. Okay, and any other hands? All right. Well, I think what we can do now is move on to the next section of the agenda. And I believe I'm just sharing my screen at this point. So I will come back. Do you see the agenda? Is that a yes? Okay. I'm going to come down to planning priorities. So there's a distinction between establishing priorities for something like a building or a park that is outside of the right-of-way versus the right-of-way. And what I want to talk about first are those facilities that are outside of the right-of-way. The ADA does not specify how the city should prioritize these facilities. And the reason being is that a facility can house multiple programs. In comparison, the right-of-way is primarily one program, pedestrian movement from point A to point B. So when you're dealing with a building that can have multiple types of programs and activities within it, there's different planning priorities that can be applied. And so what I included in the agenda for today were a series of different kinds of priorities that can be included. The first being, it's a location of multiple requests for barrier mitigation. A site that gets multiple complaints may need to be a little bit higher on the list when prioritizing barrier removals. In addition, there could be program uniqueness. This is the only place that this activity happens. For example, the library. It's your only library within walking distance of many residents. That would be potentially a higher priority. And citizen rights and responsibilities. Coming into City Hall to take care of business, apply for permits, have a plan review. That too is also a different way to look at criteria for prioritizing. Additionally, when you're looking at facilities that are spread out across the city, and since we're not looking at, say, parks, another one could be diversity, equity, and inclusion plan. If the city has a DEI or diversity, equity, and inclusion plan, that can be used to prioritize specific facilities within particular neighborhoods. In addition, you can look at geographic distribution of the facility, or as some of you had mentioned earlier, recognized user groups. I heard that there was a seniors facility and a care facility, and it was near the university, and there was high traffic. So particular user groups use a facility. You can also apply criteria such as planned obsolescence. The city knows it's going to be, demolishing a building. Therefore, they're not going to take barrier removal actions in the short term because they know a new facility is going to be built. So there is an interim programmatic solution to providing access to the program or activity on that site. So with that in mind, and the limited number of facilities that are within the scope of our analysis, are there any additional criteria we might want to consider? I have not looked at transit service in Newberg. Do you have a robust transit system? No, okay,
No, and it's run by Yamhill County.
okay. Does any other criteria or priority come to mind in thinking about this list and how to look at different facilities and weigh one versus the other?
If I could add one note about the public transit system. It is run by the county. They do have regular service routes with a general bus service, and they also have a specific call for service. But I have heard from different individuals in the community that there are often long wait times and that it is not an efficient system, but it's designed for people who do have accessibility issues and maybe need to go to a specific doctor's appointment that's off route, or another appointment or service that is specific but not general use.
Erica, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I was going on to the prioritizing criteria for prioritizing. I don't know if it's one of the ways, but kind of budget wise, which projects can you get done? The most projects you could get done with the budget versus do you use all the money on one big project to make that kind of thing? So how to split the money, basically, because that's what it eventually will come down to, is what can we get done with the money that's provided.
Yeah, so that gets to a really good process point when we are meeting with staff to discuss barrier removals. Often we will categorize barriers into large capital, small capital, and maintenance activities. The price point changes from city to city. I've had it range anywhere from anything over 5,000 is considered a large capital to anything over 50,000 is considered a large capital. And organizing the projects in those particular buckets. Is this something we can take care of in concurrent maintenance in the quick shorter term versus something that we're going to have to plan out over the next 5-10 years and identify funds for? So yes, that's a very good point, Erica, and that is something that gets folded into the transition plan data.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'm just looking around the Zoom room to see if there's any additional hands. All right, so now what I'm going to do is talk about priorities in the right of way. And the one thing I do want to note is if something does come to mind, please do not hesitate to email the city to share your ideas for integration into the draft planning priorities, because they will forward that information to us. So as I had mentioned, the right of way in the legislation has specified priorities. So when you have a facility that is adjacent to a public facility, that could be a city hall, a public library, a post office, a county park, a city park, that's going to take a higher priority than to a transportation facility, which is the next highest priority. This is followed by the commercial and business districts, right? So your first priority is public, second is transportation, third are commercial and business district, and the fourth are the other, which is often the residential areas. That does not mean that the city is wed to those priorities. You need to include those, but the city can also integrate similar things like we talked about for other facilities. Is it in an area of special need? Do we know that there is a high concentration of individuals that use mobility devices? Are there particular pedestrian high use corridors that we could prioritize over others? Do these curb ramps fall within a diversity, equity, and inclusion framework and investment in infrastructure plan. All of these things can get into the mix. So I just wanted to mention that for the right-of-way facilities, and note that if something comes to mind, we're going to ask you for any additional feedback. Because what we will do with these priorities is we will draft these criteria to the barriers. We'll apply them to the barriers with staff, put them in the criteria soup and rank them essentially, and then assign draft timelines and schedules and present that information to you for vetting and feedback. Does this sound like a plan that meets the most needs for the individuals in the neighborhood, knowing, or in the city, knowing that when there is a particular and specific complaint, the city has someone like Shannon who can take that information, triage it with the appropriate staff, and develop a plan for that individual person who has a specific need to get from point A to point B or to access a program. So that's the end goal with the priorities. If you have specific feedback, we'd like to hear that, but what we will do is apply that to the barriers that we have to come up with an implementation strategy for barrier removal. With that, are there any particular questions or concerns? Does it all sound good? You're on board with that? Okay. Well, that is pretty much the end of the content of the agenda today. I'm going to pop back to the agenda and I'm going to talk about next steps. For the next steps, we are going to analyze and summarize the responses to the questionnaire for the self-evaluation, the analysis of city's policies, activities, and services, and draft the self-evaluation report. We are going to meet with city staff to discuss the findings of the barrier assessment process, which will be going on over the course of the next few months. And we'll be summarizing that information to present to this group and talk about applying the priorities and a timeline. Once we've gotten that feedback from this group, we're going to draft a plan for public review and feedback, and hopefully come up with an implementation strategy that the city can move forward in removing barriers over the next decade or so to both physical and programmatic barriers. Yeah, Erica.
I know that you're going to do the survey of the employees, and then you have this committee. Has anything been sent out to the general public as a survey of what the larger community has seen as barriers and with these specific buildings and or right-of-ways? Has anything been sent out like that? I haven't seen anything, but I don't always.
No, that is not integrated into this scope of work. This is the basic assessment and strategize. If the city wants to continue and move forward with doing a broader outreach campaign, that's totally within the city's ability to do either now or after the plan is developed. Because the idea is, yeah, the plan is dynamic and it's a strategy. It's not a one and done type of process. It is implementation focused to deal with the dynamics of our world and changing economics. You know, the city gets different revenue each year. There's different development opportunities. Programs come and go. And so the idea with the self-evaluation and transition plan is it provides tools for current staff to use to address barriers both long-term and as they might arise. Hopefully it's easily updatable. All right, any other comments? We will have a summary that will be distributed to the participants, but the way the schedule is working out this week, it's probably going to be next week that I can get that schedule to Karin and Shannon. But other than that, this meeting was recorded, and if there's any particular content, I think, how long does it take to go up on the city's website, Karin? It's-
It'll take a couple of days. We are actually down one of our community engagement people, so we're down to one at the city. So as soon as we get a chance to download it, and then we will get it edited, you know, and then up as quickly as we can. But it'll probably next week is the latest.
And is there anything that we need to do formally with the chair or co-chair to close the meeting, Karin?
Yeah, the chair will need to adjourn the meeting quickly. I know Sandy struggled to get a meeting, this meeting set up. Is there a day of the week or a time of the day that works better for most of the group? Just trying to get an idea at this stage of the game.
I see Timothy has his hand raised.
Yeah, this time works perfectly for me. So if it's this choice to be, this will be my choice today.
Erica has her hand raised.
Mondays, ideally. Usually I have my husband to keep the kiddo, so anytime on Mondays for me.
And Andrea has her hand raised.
My schedule varies widely every day, so I just need advance notice so I can try to shuffle meetings around.
And Samuel has his hand raised.
I would similarly second what Timothy said. This time frame does work. I teach during the day, so I have to deal with students until 2:30. So just we're on spring break right now. So
Oh, excellent. And Rebecca.
This time works great for me, but I'm available during the days as long as I have plenty of notice.
Okay.
Samuel, based on your teaching, it sounds like 2:30 might be cutting it close. Would 3 o'clock on Monday work better?
that would actually work a lot better.
Great. And I am sure Karin got that all down.
All right, so that's all I have.
So do we have a vote to end the meeting?
I motion to end the meeting.
Adriana motions. Does anybody follow?
I second.
Second by Rebecca. All in favor?
I am.
Okay. We'll call the meeting adjourned.
Thank
you.
you, everyone.
All right,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.